The Glass of Iargo by Colin Kapp. Originally published in the November 1960 issue of New World's science fiction magazine and republished in a French anthology in 1963. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. The Glass of Iargo. The Panamanian girl, out of Terra, bound for the Rim, stopped off at Port Suma on Iargo with a cargo of machine tools, Indian hemp, computer memory matrices, and a poet. The latter consignment greeted the blue skies of Iargo with a smile of equal splendor and set his cap at a jaunty angle to dance with his shadow on the bright white sands. The captain of the space tramp doffed his own cap sadly as he watched the poet go. 3 months of normally tedious spaceflight had telescoped to nothing in a babble of shriveling wit and unpredictable idiocy. The grids and plating of the aging tramp still rang with echoes of wild, poetic exuberance, adding something to her spirit which even a breaker's yard could never still. "My name is Jason Van Ter. I'm a hell of a bloke to be near. I'll admit that my meter could scan a bit neater, but it's the words that fall hard on the ear." "Heaven help Iargo," said the captain to his mate. The customs inspector was mad himself from the reflected glare of the great white landing bowl, and noticed nothing odd to find a poet on the waybill. "Anything to declare?" "Nothing but 2 trochees, a dithyrem, and 6 iambic feet." The inspector leafed through his indices with a knowing smile, for he too was once an educated man. "Trochees are tax-free, dithyrems are exempt from duty, and iambic feet are unrestricted imports." He laughed uproariously at his own incredible jest. "Poet, welcome to Iargo. A ready wit is a rare encounter on a company world, but take care, doggerel dispenser, lest your posy be misconstrued as heresy. Company law has no respect for individuals." "No," said the dancing rhymer, "but neither has poetic justice a respect for company law." In the shade of a mighty bion tree, the police captain waited to intercept the poet's path, oddly disturbed by the erratic leaping of his quarry. "Standes, Iargan police." The captain flashed his card. "I was half expecting you to show up sometime." The poet studied the officer with shrewd eyes. "I take it that my presence isn't welcomed?" "Not exactly, but these times are such that we cannot be too careful. There are many points on which the company does not see eye to eye with Terra. Your position is therefore somewhat delicate. By landing at Port Suma in a freighter, you bypassed the red tape and entered unannounced. That in itself makes you suspect." "Suspect of what?" asked the poet with sly amusement. "Are you afraid of sabotage by stanzas or contagion by couplets? I come as a poet, unsung perhaps, but nonetheless lyrical." "So? Your ingenuity does not commend you. Iargan intelligence have warned us that an agent of the Terran Special Service Commission would be sent here to interfere with the company administration of these territories. Having brushed with the TSS before, I don't underestimate either their cunning or their resources. It is just possible that you are that agent, though I doubt if even they would send an idiot." The poet was unruffled. "I am Jason Van Ter, poet, prankster, and prince of perversity. Specialist in things unexpected. I am master of the disconcerting and the irrelevant. I make a paradox of the orthodox and chaos out of conformity. I'm a devil of a fellow to have around." "So I have heard," said Standes dryly, "but that doesn't answer my questions. What I have to decide is whether you are a bona fide fool or a subtle saboteur. What manner of mischief brings you here?" "Entropy. I represent the random element in human society." "A dangerous occupation," said Standes. "I represent the forces of law and order. We are mutually opposed." Then between us we maintain the status quo. "Damned if I can place you," said Standes. "You're too clever to be a fool and too ridiculous to be intelligent. But, idiot, intellectual, or impostor, your talent is undeniable. I hate to see rare things destroyed." "Then I may go?" "Curiously, I did not see you come. I was looking the other way. In a week, I will be surprised to find you here. You will then merit an official visa or a funeral, according to your deeds. The choice is largely yours." But the poet was not listening. His eyes were wandering to the township of Port Suma, snuggled low against the white slopes of Mount Desire, a picture-book community of colored contrasts and cool green shade. The staggered terraces, with brilliant sunshades and awnings flattering the whitewashed walls, proclaimed a spirit of carnival. In the air he imagined he could sense the warm excitement of Mardi Gras, but a chill stole over his heart. "Iargo has changed," he said quietly. "There is no gaiety now, no madness. I detect much trouble. The last time I stood here I had a laureate's crown upon my head, and a welcome fit for a prince. Now I have one myopic policeman and a flexible death warrant." Standes shrugged. "Time and the company have changed most things. Perhaps some of us have not changed to suit." "Time," said the poet, "is beyond my compass, but the company had better beware." "You're playing a dangerous game," said Standes. "Make one overt move and we shall shoot first and sympathize after. We cannot do otherwise, even to save our souls." "Don't worry. I carry nothing more offensive than a loaded pun." On the company world of Iargo, a new glass age had begun. The fabulous glass from the edge of the rim, prized above diamonds, spread a new brilliance and a new beauty across the starlit wastes. Iargan glass was unique, magnificent, and priceless, and the Company del Iargo maintained its secrets with a jealous savagery. "A miracle glass," said the merchant, "brighter than diamond, clearer than crystal, blazing with a million lights which reflect the soul of Iargo." "And the anguish," said the poet. He took up the magnificent vase and examined it carefully. It was a fire in majesty, burning with pinpoint brilliance in every spectral hue, and perfect in form and sympathy. Whichever way he turned it, the lightning scintillated and flickered with tongues of the coldest fire. "This vase is for sale?" "No," said the merchant. "And then again, yes. I and my children have gone hungry many times rather than sell this piece. Now the tourist trade is ended on Iargo, and to live, I must sell everything, including my children. Make me an offer." "Half a mega," said the poet. The merchant's jaw dropped open with amazement. "The offer is indeed generous, but even in poverty, let no one call me thief. If I asked 5 kilo, I should ask you much too much." "Half a mega," said the poet, "and not a credit less." "But this is madness. You offer me 100 times my price. What is it about you that makes a man bargain backwards?" "Entropy," said the poet, counting out the notes. "I exchange old values for new." "Stranger," said the merchant, his eyes near to tears, "we could do with some new values on Iargo. These are hard times for the common man. The crops have failed, and food is dead and scarce. The glass merchants have lost their livelihood since the company took over the export trade, and conscripted labor camps are being formed. Terrible times are coming." He glanced round wildly, as if afraid that his words might be overheard. "Stranger, I talk too much. Forgive my confusion and my lack of manners. The vase will be crated and sent to your hotel. See, I offer you wine to set the seal on our transaction." The poet raised the thin-walled goblet with some degree of reverence and savored the bouquet. "Your wine is like Iargan women, full-bodied, sweet, and not lacking in spirit." "To entropy," said the merchant. "To confusion," said Jason Van Teer. In his room at the hotel, the poet opened the crate and took the vase to the window. Even in the reduced light of the darkening sky, it blazed like a fabulous jewel. It was at once a thing of beauty and extreme fragility, yet in this brittle masterpiece lay hidden the strength and the autonomy of the Company del Iargo. The workmanship was exquisite, but that alone could have been equaled by master craftsmen on half a dozen worlds. Only the glass of Iargo was truly unique. He set the vase on the table and regarded it thoughtfully for some considerable time. Then, with a surge of emotion, he shattered the glass with a heavy ashtray and pounded the pieces to fragments. The fact that the outburst had cost the Special Service Commission a respectable fortune brought a smile of mischief to his lips. Somewhere in the glass of Iargo was a secret which pushed the refractive index way above that of diamond, setting therein the crystal sparkle which dazzled all the civilized worlds. Yet that secret was concealed in quite an ordinary glass, a factor defying definition or analysis. He needed only that secret to bring the Company del Iargo back to heel. So he sat in the growing darkness, pondering the silvery splinters and lost in thought, dreaming of the Iargo he once had known and of student days at Heidelberg in an age when everything was clean and full of promise. There were vineyards above Port Suma, straggling hosts of the pleasant grape, resting against the quiet hillside and flanking the dusty road which ran through the villages and on to the high slopes of Mount Desire. Here the trend of life was less affected by the new regime of government, for the wines of Partos and Menetin, though palatable enough, were not of a class to warrant an outworld market. The farms were largely self-sufficient, and the farmers continued their slow prosperity and minded their own business. It was the little things which betrayed the changing order, the slight signs easily apparent to those who study change. With comprehending eyes, the poet noted the new grass growing round the flagstones at the entrance to the church, and the fatalism mirrored in the eyes of the peasants as the new official philosophies ate the heart out of the old. At Menetin, however, the atrocity had lost its thin facade. This was the season of the gentle harvest home, but the revised company catechism had smashed the old dogmas and declared the time to be the festival of Dionysus. The old men stood alone in disapproval, but the young people, seeking excitement and an outlet from frustration, poured their hearts and souls into a wild bacchanalian orgy. The revels tended to frenzy under the influence of the freely flowing wine, and to excess by the actions of the self-appointed Bacchanites who threw themselves at the mercy of the revelers in flood of flesh and absolute abandon. The poet watched curiously, discerning beneath the discordant madness the sure hand of a professional manipulator of men. These revels were the product of propaganda and intent, deliberately engineered to revert men to barbaric ways and barbaric modes of thought. It was an atmosphere in which despotism and slavery could flourish, and where harsh laws could be executed with a savagery beyond the toleration of civilized times. Idly, he wondered why this particular area was being worked up to fever pitch. In readiness for what? "The pagan gods have returned among us," a voice spoke quietly from behind. The poet turned to the black clerical garb of the priest from the mission chapel. "Hera, Aphrodite, Ares, Dionysus, and Nemesis," said the poet, "gods of vengeance, love, war, wine, and retribution. Anything to divert the minds of the people from the creeping paralysis stealing over their liberty. It takes a brave man to wear the cloth on Iargo, father. These are dangerous days to be dedicated to the old ideals. I have already lost more than life, said the priest. Wherefore should I now be afraid? I see you are an outworlder and a man of learning. Come with me, for I have something of importance to divulge before the new heresy brings me to my knees. Wondering, the poet followed the priest into the cobbled shade and through the paintless door of the mission house. Are you always as ready to reveal your heart to strangers? The priest was an old and patient man, white-haired, and with a smile of silvery wistfulness. Anyone who witnesses the feast of Dionysus with such a look in his eyes is no stranger to me. Regardless of creed, humanity shows. What I have to tell could cost you your life. The choice is yours, whether or not to listen. I am a poet. I'm not afraid of words. Then hear me, for I don't have much time left. The people of Iargo are starving. Bread and flour are scarce and will be scarcer. They are told of catastrophes which ruin the corn, the drought and the storms at harvest. I have already heard as much. Then you have heard a lie. I have lay workers throughout Iargo, and they all give me the same report. All over Iargo there was a good harvest. I know, said the poet quietly. I have been in the fields and seen the richness of the chaff, and what few heads the rain has left to rot. There are more mysteries on Iargo than the company would care to admit. Even before the bonfires were lighted, the wine had extracted its toll from the revelers, and lethargy had laid its leaden hand over the field of rejoicing. The fires, uncared for as soon as lit, trailed long columns of smoke across the incredible sunset and lost their glitter against the backdrop of the bright rimmed stars. 1 hour after sunset found the poet clear of the vineyard's throe and on the edge of the great white throat of the mountain. Plaintively, the single note of the mission bell sang in the gathering darkness far below. Then, from out of the deceptive shadows on the mountain road, a string of lights became a line of vehicles manned by soldiers in the dreaded black and yellow of the company guard. Pressed back out of sight, the poet watched them pass, suddenly sickened as he realized their purpose. The night closed down to darkness and to silence, save for the forlorn bell tolling. Then that too was quietened at a burst of automatic gunfire, and the flames of the burning mission stood out like a brave soul in a sea of darkness. Item. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The administration of the Company del Iargo was absolutely corrupt. Item. Iargo was starving, yet the granaries were full. No administration courts revolution unless the gains are worth the strife. Item. The glass of Iargo was unique. Exports were increasing in proportion to the power of the new administration. How do you equate refractive indices with empty stomachs? By morning, he was on the outskirts of Klitz, where the great glass foundries labored in the bowl of the mountain ranges. At the head of the valley the air was crisp and rare, but, as he descended, the sulphurous breath of the great chimneys caught vaguely in his throat, and the air was loud with the shunting of coal trucks low on the valley floor. His destination proved to be an aging mansion built hard against the sheer wall of the rising southern range. The occupant scowled sullenly at his visitor. "You don't remember me?" asked Van Tier. Sterner looked at him gravely for a moment. "The face I don't remember, but the hands! Ah, those hands! They are the hands of an artist and a craftsman. I have seen them working somewhere. 8 years ago on Terra at the Galactic Exposition. You took first prize for offhand glass blowing. And you the second," said Sterner, brightening. "I remember it now. It was a contest second to none. I lost to a master, said the poet, but you promised one day to show me the true art as practiced on Iargo. I'm here to remind you of that promise. Sterner pushed wine across the table. Quite impossible. Forgive me, but times change. There are no more expositions now, and no more contests. There is only work and more work. The company pushes us hard on our contracts, and the penalties for failure are barbarous. If you want to see glass, why don't you try at a company plant? Because I'm not very welcome on Iargo, and you are one of the few independent glassmen who could show me what I want to know. So that's it. Sterner rose and peered out of the window cautiously. I should have guessed at something wrong, with you an outworlder and all the ports closed to visitors. What are you, a spy? Something of the sort. The poet nodded. I'm a TSS agent, gunning for the Company del Iargo. Sterner looked at him sourly. So much for the protection we are promised under galactic law. No one man can fight the company. I can. The company is finished if it loses the glass monopoly, and that monopoly depends on the secret formulation of Iargan glass. I intend to get that secret. Not from me. Sterner shook his head gravely. I am a true glassman of Iargo. I have my fidelity to the guild, even though I deplore the company's despotism. I don't ask you to speak. I ask you to let me work. I know the feel of every glass and glaze in the galaxy, but to get the measure of Iargan glass, I need to study it in the mass. I need to gather and blow, to spin and draw and shear. By such signs can I glean the clues I'm seeking. By such foolishness, you would sign both our death warrants. One word to the company guard, and we would both be slowly hung. You may recognize the hands, said the poet, but you know nothing of the man. By night, the glass fields of Klitz resembled the galleries of hell. From end to end, the valley was tormented by the dull redness of the 1,000 furnaces, whose fiery malignance was trapped and transformed by the heavy smoke clouds caught in the rim of the mountains. Most of the manufacturing units were company-owned, but Sterner, almost the last of the independent glassmen, still operated his own furnaces and shop in recognition of the finest offhand skills which he and his team possessed. To the right, the huge tank furnace of a company unit threw out the unimaginable rose-red glow of 1,000 tons of molten glass, and the raw heat and brilliance dazed the senses and transformed even the shadows into hot, troubled alcoves of despair. Sterner's shop was smaller and hotter and even louder with the roar of the ancient hand-fed furnaces. Having no use, either in quantity or quality, for continuous tank-fed glass, Sterner still produced and fined his melt in clay pots, and the raw eye of the pot furnace burned across the sweating bodies of the workmen like the beams of an alien sun. Here was glass blowing at its crudest, and at once its most magnificent form, with tools little changed since the beginning of the history of glass. These rare craftsmen could match the skills of all antiquity, and nothing from ancient Byzantine or Venetian hands would have troubled their earthly, wonderful dexterity. The glass blowers worked in pairs, one gathering and blowing, and one assisting. Sterner had furnaces to attend, so the poet was content to handle the blowpipe and pontal, to judge the weight, and to accustom his fingers to the unfamiliar steel. Then he watched the others carefully, noticing how the hallmarks of their skill appeared to stem from the genius of a common tutor, a characteristic as distinct as a dialect in a language. Then Sterner returned, his eyes wide and nervous with anxiety. "The company guard are searching the area. If you're to remain here, you must get to work." The poet nodded and gathered molten glass on the blowpipe from the incandescent pot. He judged the gather to a nicety and immediately was in sympathy with the task. He scarcely noticed when the guard officer entered the door. He was no longer a poet. He was a sweating figure moving in silhouette against the fiery scene. The officer spoke to Sterner, but the latter waved him back clear of the working area with swift dismissal, and before their eyes the poet rolled the blowpipe to keep the molten gather concentric, a slight smile playing on his lips.
"We're searching for an outworlder who passed through Menitin yesterday. He may well have come into Klitz."
"A glassman?" asked Sterner.
"No, we think he was a poet. He's an alien bookworm and rabble-rouser."
"You may look around," said Sterner, "but I think there are only glassmen here." Van Ter rolled the glass easily on the marver block and with patient skill blew through the pipe to form a thick-walled bulb of glass. Then he reheated the glass and blew and rolled and shaped until a beautiful vase-like bulb twisted and spun on the blowpipe in a wonder of fluted symmetry. So precise was his art that the guard officer was drawn to watch, hypnotized by the spinning wonder of the craft.
"I don't see him here," said the officer, lingering.
"Well, then excuse me," said Sterner, "for I have work to do." Van Ter spun a marvelous foot on the vase, and Sterner gathered glass on a pontal and pressed it onto the foot, thus transferring support of the vase to the pontal. For a short time the two men worked in unison with the vase spinning between them. Then, with the vase supported on the pontal, the poet cut off the excess plastic glass with shears to form the rim. Now he opened out and shaped the rim with a wood jack, and the job was complete. A tap toppled the vase from the pontal, and the piece was deftly transferred to the annealing furnace to begin the long, slow cooling.
"A wonderful trade," said the guard officer as he left. "Would that I too had studied glass."
The poet stopped and mopped his brow. Sterner's eyes mirrored his admiration, and behind his admiration, fear.
"Now you must leave here, for I cannot stand such risks. I hope you found what you were seeking."
But the poet gave no answer. He was looking at his hands and remembering the feel of the glass, and wondering where he had felt a glass like that before. From Klitz the poet took to the mountains, sleeping rough and working his way down the western slope into the lowlands, where the blued stubble in the fields still waited the farmer's grudged attention. In the hour of the first light, he turned at the edge of a ragged field and went exploring the unkempt hedges. Uncut near the bole of a tree, he picked up a random spray of blue-tinged corn, missed by the reapers, and stuck it in his hat, where it nodded like a grassy plume. The corn yield in the region had been ample. The soil was rich, and the few remaining heads were heavy with the seed. The priest at Menitin had not been mistaken in his estimates. Here, as elsewhere, there had been a bounteous harvest. Once again it nailed the lie of the company's claim of famine. Behind him, blue and green, the trim dawn of Iargo splayed across the sky, heralding the mellower sun of autumn. The poet shivered slightly, not from the crisp chill, but from the dark shaft of oppression which troubled his thinking, and, adjusting his collar against an imaginary wind, he began the long trek back towards Port Suma. In the central plaza, a blind beggar deftly caught the spinning silver coin and thanked him with a single word, "Police!" The poet chuckled and spun another piece of silver in the air to be caught as deftly as the first. "Where and how many?" "6 magnificent, sir, at the hotel. They set a trap." He drew his fingers across his throat with an air of finality. "Thank you," said the poet. "You serve me well." Leaving the beggar a moderately rich man, he walked on through the broad, untidy streets with just a hint of sadness in his step. His room had been ransacked, Drawers were wide open, loose paper had been pulled from the walls, and all his cases and luggage had been emptied onto the bed. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Captain Standez was staring fretfully out of the window and turned abruptly at the poet's voice. "No, but then I didn't expect to find it written. I know you're after the secret of the glass, else you would not have gone to Klitz." "You can't prove a thing," said the poet easily. "We don't need proof on Iargo anymore. An informer saw you at Meniton and informed the company guard. They suspected you went into Klitz, and they also suspect what for. Now you are officially brought to my notice, and I have received a reprimand for not reporting your landing." "Hardly your day, is it?" The poet cleared himself a seat on the bed. "No," said Standez grimly. "Far from it. The fact remains that I have to investigate you and apprehend if necessary. Rest assured that if the company guard had made this raid, you'd by now have been missing about 10 fingernails and anticipating the removal of your toenails." No. If the company guard had made this raid, I'd have been about 20 miles away this instant." Standez glanced out at the small knot of beggars gathered before the hotel. "I have no doubt," he said heavily. "Can you think of one good reason why I shouldn't arrest you and hand you over to the company guard?" "I have 1,000 reasons, but one of more appeal to you than most. Did you ever hear of a priest named Joseph Hervey, who ran the mission at Meniton?" "I know him well. I was a Meniton man myself." "He was shot down in cold blood by the company guard. The mission was then burned around him. His crime was that he believed in humanity. What do you believe in, Captain?" Standez was silent for a long second. "You have a point," he said, "but there's nothing I can do. I'm like most little men, caught up in the scheme of things. I bow to the powers that be, listen respectfully to authority, and keep my mouth shut. Such sacrifices earn me a secure bed even if I don't sleep too well." "Then I'm in your hands," said Van Ter resignedly. "If you won't help yourself, I cannot help you. But you'll never get me to the company guard alive." "I believe that," said Standez. "That's why I'm going to take a risk. There's an axial freighter leaving Port Suma at sundown. This may cost me my job, but I've a mind to see you leave on that." Standez was tall and austere, and walked with a precise military erectness, though limping slightly from an old wound in the leg. In contrast, the poet cavorted through the customs shed like some latter-day Puck, a grimacing imp of a man with a grotesque plume of blue Iargan corn waving over his head. Behind him, 2 wary policemen, guns in hand, kept a suspicious eye on their capering charge. At the foot of the loading scaffold, Standez held out his hand, his voice tinged with regret. "Goodbye, poet. This is where we part. In a way, I'm disappointed. You came with the promise of a lion, and you leave with the meekness of a lamb. I had hoped that entropy had something more to offer." "Never judge by appearances," said the poet. "I can be relied upon to perform the unexpected. I make a living by doing that which should be left undone, and leaving undone that which should be done up. That is why when this ship lifts, the might of the Company del Iargo goes with it." Standez stared up, his expression suddenly a mixture of hope and disbelief. "The glass? How could that be?" "Yes, the secret of the glass," said the poet. "In 6 months I can topple the company out of the galactic markets. With no trade or income, the company cannot survive. So easily is a tyranny finished." So saying, he entered the lock and was gone from sight. Standez remained staring upwards for a few seconds. Then he saluted gravely and walked thoughtfully away. Aboard the freighter, the poet took the spray of blue corn from his hat and gently tapped the rich seed onto the table. He gathered his gleanings into a small pile and ran it through his fingers idly, marveling. Then he moved to the port to watch the fair orb of Iargo slowly falling far beneath. Farewell, faint hearts. The history of man is intertwined with threads of glass. Natural obsidian tipped the spears and arrows of the Stone Age, and man-made glass had 10,000 years of history ere Jesus of Nazareth was born. But what of the early origins of glass? Was it first produced by the accidental fusion of sand and soda in some early merchant's fire? Or perhaps by the strange coincidence that the ash of burnt grain, when fused, itself produces one of the many types of glass? As on Iargo, the blue grain of the lowlands was burnt and fused to produce the miracle glass from the edge of the rim. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.